Thank you very much, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the IISS 2019 annual dinner and Alistair Buchan lecture. I'm very happy and also touched that we have David Buchan, son of Alistair Buchan, our first director, with us tonight. Last year we held a dinner here to mark our 60th anniversary, and it was such an excellent occasion that we decided not to wait 60 years for another such meal, but to turn this instead into an annual event to which I trust the London strategic community will each year look forward. Last November, we announced a new fundraising drive to support our important and influential work, and in the 2018-2019 fiscal year, we have raised close to $15 million outside of our normal constant annual revenue flows from research, publications, conferences, and consulting. And we will be making a big push next year to sell more licenses to our fantastic database, the Military Balance Plus. This unique and powerful IISS information tool, to use a favorite phrase of the day, allows the turbocharging of defense analysis by users in government and the private sector. More generally, now that we have refined what we have called our mega proposals for funding over the next 5 years, we shall apply ourselves to raising money for as many of these as we can from governments, corporations, foundations, and private individuals. As ever, no matter what the sources of our funds, the IISS will always retain full and absolute authority over the choice of our researchers, the questions asked, the methodologies applied, the analysis conducted, and the conclusions reached. I want to make special note this evening of the $8 million gift that we received from the Japanese government to establish a Japan chair at the IISS. I am delighted that next month Mr. Robert Ward, editorial director at the Economist Intelligence Unit, will take up this post at the IISS. His Japanese is fluent, and he has extensive experience of analyzing Japanese foreign policy and economic policy. And he shall also be charged with the direction of our geoeconomics and strategy program. Also, as part of the Japan Chair program, we have appointed Yuka Koshino as Research Fellow for Japanese Security Policy and Defense Industry. She comes to us in January, separately funded, with the support of the Asia-Pacific Initiative in Tokyo and the business leaders Matsumoto-san and Samata-san in Japan, for which we are also very grateful. And it's therefore with special pleasure that we will welcome to the stage later this evening Yoichi Funabashi to be our Alistair Buchan lecturer to speak about Japan and the world. Funabashi-san has been a member of the IISS for decades. As editor of the Asahi Shimbun newspaper, he was an early supporter of our Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore and is now a member of our council. At this time in our national and transatlantic debate, it's wonderful to have his authoritative perspective from what is now called the Indo-Pacific. The international context, as we described it in our annual assessment strategic survey, makes for a difficult background to his remarks and to our future study. The trends of 2018-19 have all confirmed the atomization of international society. Neither balance of power nor international rules-based governance serve as ordering principles. International institutions have been marginalized. The diplomatic routine of meetings continues, yet the competing exertions of national efforts, too rarely coordinated with others, matter more, and most often they are erratic in both execution and consequence. Almost all international strategic issues of importance, whether the Middle East peace process, the conflict in Ukraine, or the tensions on the Korean Peninsula, are either in a constant state of feckless negotiation or artificially and dangerously frozen. Outcomes are fleeting, partial, and then subject to review. There is no predictable rhythm to international affairs. The disruptors carry most of the advantage. Those clinging to the status quo are losing their grip. The effort to master advanced technologies, data, and information has added a new field of competition, with control of 5G mobile network technology and the future of the internet as key battlegrounds. The United States is pricing itself out of alliance politics, complaining that its European allies contribute too little and seeking to charge Asian allies multiples of what they now pay for American bases. China is advancing a model of development through its Belt and Road Initiative that is intended to ensure more states stand with it or are usefully neutral. Some small powers feel horribly squeezed by these pressures and the loss of certainty. Others have gained disproportionate bargaining power in the new diplomatic bidding wars. Still others are able to carry out ruthless domestic policies in the sure knowledge that there is no effective international community willing or able to check their excesses. A global rules-based order, to the degree it was ever established, is, at least for the moment, deposited in the banks of Western strategic nostalgia. Much the same can be said of international law, now so honored in the breach rather than the observance that it cannot make a credible claim to global force. Law is made and sustained by politics. When law cannot settle disputes, they are shunted back to the political realm for resolution. If this is true of municipal law, it is all the more so for international law. As compliance with international law shrinks, the rules will be made by those who command the most political power. Quite possibly, international law will cease to have true international pretensions. Universality then cedes to regionalism. The separate regional political orders and internet ecosystems might then be replicated in separate international legal arrangements. A global rules-based order may in time be reestablished. That will only happen with a determined application of statecraft rather than by the earnest convening of international summits. The process will be competitive, it will be upsetting, it will be draining and dynamic. The questions are, whose rules will they be and how many different orders might they govern? The IISS is committed to developing sound public policy for this strange new strategic universe we inhabit. Our data and research are tailored to the issues of the time and the challenges of the future. Not for us, the passive strategic sports commentary of the average international affairs think tank. We have limited interest in calling the day-by-day strategic score. The role we have chosen for ourselves is persistent engagement with governments, companies, and experts to help frame policy choices and assess geopolitical risks. We are proud when the media draw attention to the special qualities of our work. It is important for us that a wide public see us as the trusted source for vital strategic information and analysis. Our goal, however, is not generous public approbation, but actual policy effect. We engage in no advocacy, but it is right that we are seen as strategic actors in our own right, with a duty to bring people together around fact bases that we generate to better analyze, but also to shape the strategic framework. Today, our International Advisory Council discussed our plans to produce work across our big themes of war, power, and rules. Tomorrow, the trustees will decide on the budgets and IISS business strategies that will fuel this effort. This evening, I just hope that all of you who have supported us in different ways over the year have a really excellent dinner and a very good time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great privilege to be addressing such a learned and distinguished a group of scholars and practitioners. I'm truly honored to have been given the opportunity to share some of my thoughts and observations with you, and be granted this platform to speak to you by IISS. I first must express my deep gratitude to John for extending a warm invitation for me to deliver the Alastair Buckin lecture, which, as with IISS, possesses extraordinarily rich history. I also have to congratulate John and that institute for launching the Japan Chair and API, Asia Pacific Initiative, is incredibly humbled to be a part of this ambitious venture. I'm delighted to say that our institute will be sending a researcher to serve at IISS in the role of research fellow for Japanese security and defense policy. It is my belief and hope that the cooperation on this fellowship will plant the seeds for further collaboration between our institutions. At this point in history, we are confronted with a harsh reality that the rise and the fall of nations in this period are determined by the state of the international order. Japan, which has perhaps gained more than any country from the liberal international order held by the United States, is a prime example of this, and experience serious consequences if the US allowed for the regional order it has led in the Asia Pacific to collapse entirely. The liberal international order in the Northeast Asia already faces salient threats from China and North Korea. But in an unfortunate turn of events, this order now faces a serious threat by none other than the United States, the supposed guarantor of this system, and of course, Japan's most closest ally. The most tragic example of its abandonment of this order, the Trump administration withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership a mere 3 days after the president's inauguration. We do not know yet how detrimental it will be in the coming years, particularly in our competition with China. To give this instance better framing, suppose the United States had abandoned NATO a year after its founding. What would have happened to containment policy towards the Soviet Union? Would we have won the Cold War? Even the alliance system, which has been the anchor of the liberal international order, has been challenged by the United States. Mr. Trump is the first US president in post-war history to openly question the value of the alliance. His view towards such relationship, including the US-Japan alliance, is transactional, zero-sum, and short-term. In June 2018 in Singapore, the president came close to trading the dissolution of US forces in Korea for a denuclearization pledge from Kim Jong-un, and unilaterally canceled a US-South Korea military exercise without even consulting his own Secretary of Defense. Earlier this year, Mr. Trump criticized the US-Japan security treaty for favoring Japan too heavily by complaining that the Japanese are not obligated to help defend the United States and could simply watch on a Sony television if America were attacked. Japan is, of course, not the only US ally in Asia that has felt Mr. Trump's wrath. The president has demanded South Korea accept a 5-fold increase in the amount of money Seoul pays in the host nation support. He will likely pressure Tokyo to do the same, even though Abe has reportedly argued to Trump that Japan in fact pays 74% of what it costs to host the US forces there. Trump's approach cast the United States as a mere renter of resources and US armed forces as a band of mercenaries. He shows no hesitation in linking trade and security issues, often seeking to reap trade benefits, even at the expense of security interests. Despite Trump's actions, Prime Minister Abe has done an admirable job in stabilizing the US-Japan relationship, even if it means he had to beg for certain things from the president. As a matter of fact, the Abe administration has two very different but equally intense feelings towards Trump. On one hand, Japan feels assured that threat perception gap between Tokyo and Washington toward Beijing has narrowed to almost zero. Indeed, the Trump administration has taken a tough position against China that stands in stark contrast to the Obama administration's ambiguous stance toward the country. There is a broad consensus in Tokyo that Trump is justified in publicly shaming China for its massive cyber theft, economic statecraft, predatory trade policy, civil-military fusion of the industrial policy, and export of censorship. At the same time, however, Japan has in no way granted Trump its full confidence. The administration's sheer lack of focus, along with the president's impulsive tweeting, poor policy coordinations, and apparent death wish for the alliance, as Edward Luce argued in his column in the Financial Times, all make Tokyo increasingly nervous. And then there is a troubling possibility that Trump's America First policy could continue uninterruptedly or even intensify if he's reelected, as he will most likely grow more uninhibited if left in office. Under such a scenario, Japan would suffer under either a profound fear of entrapment if the US-China relations slide towards confrontation, or profound fear of abandonment if the United States turn even more inward-looking and abdicate its leadership role in Asia-Pacific. Trump's potential re-election is, of course, far from the only foreign policy issue that Tokyo must concern itself with in the coming year. Japan already feels exposed to numerous mounting challenges, particularly from China, but also from the Korean Peninsula and the wider Eurasian region. Geopolitics, which John Foster Dulles declared was transcendent after the San Francisco Peace Treaty, is now vengefully back in the Asia-Pacific. Ironically, it is the United States that unleashed its return by eroding the rules-based international order. China has contributed equally to the rise of geopolitics in Asia by aggressively employing economic statecraft. We can trace this approach back nearly 10 years to September 2010, when a Chinese ship captain rammed through two Japanese Coast Guard vessels as it intruded to the Senkaku Island waters. Japan detained the captain, leading China to retaliate with a de facto export ban of the rare earths to Japan. Such economic statecraft must be placed in the wider context of China's geopolitical ambitions. Speaking to the foreign ministers of ASEAN countries in ASEAN Regional Forum in Hanoi in the summer of 2010, Chinese Foreign Minister John Chipman declared, "China is a big country. You are small countries, and that's just a fact." The remark was eerily reminiscent of Thucydides' immortalized Melian dialogue. The strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. Well, only with Chinese characteristics. China's economic statecraft towards neighbors such as Taiwan, Singapore, the Philippines, South Korea, Australia, and now in Canada is brutal and vindicative. China's presence is now felt in a variety of areas, ranging from the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean to the North Pole and now South Pacific. The country is rapidly becoming a revisionist power rather than being co-opted into existing institutions and the current rules of the game, as the West would prefer. Instead, China is operating on its own terms and seeks to co-opt other countries into the system of the rules it wishes to dictate. But China's grand projects are not without weakness. Its Belt and Road Initiative, dubbed One Belt, One Road, One Cloud, is already overstretched, and the questions abound regarding its sustainability as China's economy slows. Despite this, however, China has already enshrined the Belt and Road Initiative in the constitution of the Chinese Communist Party, and it should therefore be seen as a long-term, perhaps 30-year project. China has embraced what Premier Li Keqiang has called mass entrepreneurship and mass innovation. China's market and social implementation of technology is both rapid and dynamic. The country also has the advantage of being able to harness big data on a massive scale, with the state providing such data for free to Chinese platformers while sidestepping property rights and the privacy of citizens. China's authoritarian political system is naturally aligned with the age of dataism. In fact, data is a perfect weapon for China. So while some scholars may argue that China is more adept at deploying technology rather than developing it, and while others still posit that Chinese technological advancements are driven only by theft, we must avoid underestimating China's technological prowess. We also need to be cautious of this innovation, despite whether it is liberal or, as I argue, it is illiberal. To fully understand my caution, one must view the future of Chinese technology from a Schumpeterian point of view and focus on the connection between the technology and market, and particularly the critical mass of customers who consume it. It is a customer that acts as a primary driver of technological innovation. And in China's case, such advancement is backed by the full weight of one massive consumer, the Chinese Communist Party, whose survival depends on the state's strategic use of certain technologies, such as AI and big data, and the government's strengthening of social surveillance and political control. And if this kind of illiberal innovation that Beijing supports is truly sustainable, then mounting a response to it will be all the more difficult. We will be unable to simply contain China and prevent it from further advancing its technologies. Instead, the lesson from President John F. Kennedy's undelivered Dallas Trade Mart speech, that a nation can be no stronger abroad than she is at home, should guide our approach. We must develop our own technologies and foster innovation among our own societies. Japan's diplomatic efforts to conclude TPP-11 following US abandonment of the pact are truly remarkable in the sense the country managed to emerge from the episode as a rule shaper and a proactive stabilizer in the Asia-Pacific. Indeed, through these actions, Japan expressed a genuine desire and aspiration to uphold the liberal international order. However, its leadership with respect to TPP has revealed Japan's keen sense of vulnerability and insecurity as the world witnesses the rise of crude power games among major states, particularly between the US and China, with their looming tech giants, and among nuclear states on Japan's periphery, and amongst emerging demographic giants of Asia, including China, India, Pakistan, and Indonesia. Japan, of course, still boasts the world's third largest economy and maintains the status of major player on the international stage. But as the world becomes a mega geo-economic battleground, where rule-making is replaced by power grabbing and economic interdependence is weaponized, Japan finds itself more nakedly exposed and feels smaller and smaller. In his seminal 1979 work, Japan as Number One, Ezra Vogel outlined his own vision for how the Japanese could play a significant role on the global stage. 40 years later, Japan holds the same potential, and now, more than ever, has the opportunity to leave its mark on the world as a rule shaper among other small countries. For, except for the US and China, we are all small countries now, connected through the same sense of vulnerability. Indeed, by connecting ourselves through our shared vulnerability, small countries can cooperate with one another and work to strengthen rules-based order in which we may thrive. In his famous January 1907 memorandum, Aya Crow asserted that Britain was a so-called natural protector of weaker communities. And through open market policy, she decidedly strengthened her hold on the interested friendship of other nations. E.H. Carr, citing this paragraph in the 20 Years Crisis, 1919-1939, stated, "This advantage made it natural for Great Britain to appear as a champion of the political independence of small nations. Japan, together with like-minded countries, particularly the countries of the European Union, must strive to become such a champion, particularly in the age of mega geoeconomics." Thank you very much.